だけどそれ以上にこう育っていく環境がそうさせてしまう。だから今は受け入れられる別のことなんです。
新選組を離れて療養した方がいい。空気のきれいな場所でゆっくりと。
新選組を離れる、それはできません。
physical therapy, and it was a little rough today. What is happening with this music? That was strange. Hello, V. Hello, Riddy. Yes, be safe when you drive. I could not figure out what font color to do for the title because nothing would work on this picture. Oh well. Here, do you want to actually see the picture? That's a garden in Shanghai that I didn't actually get to go to, but that's what it looks like. And there's a statue, so I feel like it goes with the theme, right? Yeah, it's hard to do text over images that aren't solid. This is true. This is true. I did my best. I just finished some tots. So, yesterday, we did some reading.
One of the exciting things about writing and teaching a sushi
Stop!
class is that I have
No
skills
ads!
and
Stop ads! Stop talking! Okay, Riddy, be safe! Is the music volume, is it okay? Looks a little quiet right now. Is it too loud? I really can't tell. And I'm concerned since I'm having that seems good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, yesterday, we read a little bit. People went to the carnival. And Mr. Drew's briefcase got stolen with important private documents in it. So that's the last thing that happened. And then Joe Mitza is gonna play some trick on he's gonna try to scam Miss Morse, who they've been looking for. They found a different Miss Morse, and they still have her suitcase. I think that's basically the gist of it. They're looking for Miss Morse. Stop talking. Stop talking. Oh, yeah. Stop talking. Oh. He doesn't listen to me. Anyways, shall we get started since I don't have all that much time? Although Keegan has not answered me about the timing of when I'm supposed to come get him, but I'm glad you liked your Disney bag because Thank you. Thank you for that. Hi, Terry. Guess it's up to me. What's up to me? We'll do this one for Riddy.
I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a song on a song on a song on a song.
Oh, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to dance in a small screen, you know what I'm saying? V knows this very well since she had to do it a lot for her May fundraiser. Yes. Okay. Hi Terry. Welcome for joining. Thank you for being here. How is everyone? Yes, I will get started right now. And just wait for Keegan to answer me. Oh, let's start the music back up. Knew I was missing something. But you're just a pro at on-screen dancing. This is true. I don't know how I can compete. Okay, we're gonna start with chapter 10, called A Significant Clue. Perhaps you only misplaced the briefcase, Dad, Nancy said hopefully. It should be here somewhere. It should be, but it isn't, Parson Drew replied grimly. No, I'm convinced the case has been stolen. I have an idea that the thief, whoever he is, came here knowing where I had the Owen Wormrath papers. It will be a blow to have the documents lost or get into the hands of someone antagonistic to my client's interests. Nancy searched the room carefully, but the missing briefcase could not be found. Suddenly, she stooped to pick up a brown button from the floor. A glance assured her that it did not belong to her father's suit. Let me see that, Mr. Drew said quickly. I believe you found a clue, Nancy. This button must have come from the thief's coat, Nancy declared, proud that she had observed something which her keen-eyed father had overlooked. It may help to identify him later. Yes, if we are able to trail the man, Parson Drew nodded. I will question the maids. Inquiry revealed that neither the cleaning women who served the floor nor any of the bellboys had seen any suspicious-looking person in the vicinity of Mr. Drew's room. The hotel manager, although disturbed over the theft, was likewise unable to be of any help. Nancy and the lawyer returned to their own floor, discouraged at their failure to find additional clues. Mr. Drew paused in the hall for a moment to get a cool drink of water from an ice tank. Walking slowly on alone, Nancy rounded a corner of the corridor where she paused abruptly. The Drew girl had seen a shadowy form move hastily away from her father's room. She could not be certain, but she believed the man had been listening at the door. He walked rapidly, and without glancing backward, entered his own room at the end of the hall. When Mr. Drew joined her, Nancy told him what she had observed. The lawyer was inclined to believe that the man she had seen was merely curious, having no connection whatsoever with the theft of the briefcase. Yeah, right. Don't lose any sleep over the matter, he said kindly. Go to bed now, and in the morning we can delve into the affair more thoroughly. Nancy retired but could not fall asleep. She knew that her father was deeply concerned over the loss of the papers and wished that she might aid him in recovering them. I believe that man who was skulking at the door did have something to do with the theft, she thought. I wish I could have caught a glimpse of his face. In the morning, Nancy awoke with a firm determination to try out a little scheme of her own. Telling Bess and George she would not eat breakfast with them, she waited in her room until they had gone downstairs. Then she raced to a nearby shop she had noticed previously and purchased a chambermaid's uniform. Hurriedly, she returned and changed her clothes. Yeah, because they sell those nearby. I look the part, I'm sure, she said, glancing at herself in the mirror. Gathering up several clean towels, she opened the door of her room. No one was in the hall, so she hastened along the corridor until she reached the spot where she had seen the suspicious stranger go the night before. Rapping on number 359, she waited. Who's there? A gruff voice demanded. Nancy did not dare reply, as she had no master key with which to open the door. Finally, the occupant of the room strode across the carpet and in a moment was facing the maid. May I make the bed now? Nancy asked sweetly. Oh, I suppose so, the man growled. Come on in. The girl's heart began to beat a little faster as she directed a swift, searching glance at the man. He was an unpleasant-looking individual with a sharp, evil face. She had never seen him before. He sat down at once at a desk to continue writing a letter. Try not to make a lot of clatter, he said irritably. I hate noise. Yes, sir, I'll work very quietly, Nancy murmured meekly, beginning to dust the place, which was a sitting room. All the while, her eyes were roving swiftly about in search of her father's briefcase. "Can't you let that go?" the man demanded with a scowl after a few moments. "I'll do the other room first, sir," Nancy offered. "All right, I wish you would. Clear out of here. But mind you, don't bother any of my private papers." "Oh, no," Nancy murmured again. She slipped quietly into the next room and shook the bed several times, causing the springs to rattle so that the man would assume that she was busy with sheets and blankets. Then she moved stealthily to the bureau and softly opened each drawer. "Empty," she observed in disappointment. Next, the clothes closet drew her attention. She saw a suitcase packed with wearing apparel, and beside it stood her father's briefcase. Fearing that she might not be able to take it from the suite without discovery, Nancy quickly divested it of some papers, which she stuffed into the front of her uniform. Scarcely had she done this when she heard the man in the next room push back his chair and come toward the bedchamber. Swiftly, Nancy darted away from the closet. She was deeply engrossed in her bed-making when he entered. Ignoring her, he moved to the telephone and called the office. He informed the clerk that he was checking out in 10 minutes. Nancy went on calmly smoothing the bed covers, but her mind worked with lightning rapidity. Unless she should act quickly, the fellow would escape from the hotel. He must be detained at all costs. Nancy knew that she had located the thief, for in addition to the incriminating briefcase, she noticed that the top button of the man's coat was missing. She held her breath when he went to the closet for his luggage. However, he picked up the bag and the briefcase without opening the latter. When a bellboy came to the door a few minutes later, he gave up the suitcase but insisted upon carrying the briefcase himself. The instant the door closed, Nancy darted to the telephone. "Detain the man from room 359 who is just coming down to pay his bill," she said crisply to the clerk. "He is carrying away stolen property." Then hastening... Thank you for the bits! That's so sweet. Thank you. Okay. Then hastening back to her room, Nancy quickly changed into her regular clothing. She called her father from the adjoining suite and told him of her discovery. He identified readily the papers as those which had been stolen. "Clever work, Nancy," he praised. "We'll go downstairs and take a look at the thief." The detained man blustered and fumed. "It is an outrage to accuse me of stealing it," he retorted angrily. "I found it in my room when I came in late last night. How it got there, I don't know, but I assumed it had been left by the former room occupant. At any rate, I was just turning it in here at the desk." "And can you explain away this button just as readily?" Nancy asked sarcastically. She held up the brown object so that all might see that it was identical with the others on the man's suit. For an instant, the wily individual looked stunned. "My daughter picked up this button in my room last night," Carson Drew said coldly. "I don't know anything about it," the accused person muttered, avoiding the lawyer's eyes. He appealed to the hotel clerk. "This man, whoever he is, hasn't a scrap of proof. Are you going to believe his story or mine?" "Well," the clerk stammered uncomfortably, "the briefcase was found in your room, Mr. Dincher." "Left there by someone else, I told you. Probably this girl planted it herself just to make trouble for me." "How ridiculous," Nancy said. "I suppose you claim I pulled the button off your suit too." "As to the button, it has no significance. The one I lost from my coat has been missing a month." The man tossed the leather briefcase down on the desk. Then picking up his suitcase, he stalked angrily from the lobby. "Aren't you going to stop him?" Nancy cried, gazing accusingly at the baffled clerk. "He ought to be arrested." "There really isn't any proof," the man began apologetically. "You're afraid to do anything," Carson Drew said sharply. "Why not admit the truth?" Turning to his daughter, he said, "Come along, Nancy." "Oh, Dad," she murmured in distress. "Let that thief get away." "I know, Nancy, but if the hotel folks won't support us, we'd only cause a scene if we tried to detain him. Anyway, thanks to your quick thinking, I've recovered the missing papers. I hope they're all intact." "I'll check over everything just as soon as I get to my room," Mr. Drew declared. "Let's go there now." A hasty inspection of the documents taken from the briefcase revealed that nothing had been kept by the thief. This affair should serve as a warning to me, Nancy's father remarked thoughtfully, his brows knitting in a frown. I figure that Wormrath sent that man Denture here to steal the Owen documents. I fear it's only the beginning of trouble. But you'll be on your guard after this, Dad. I wasn't thinking of myself, Nancy, Mr. Drew replied soberly. I'm worried about Mr. Owen.
Themselves in my travel experiences so that they can see that they too can travel.
I'm worried about Mr. Owen. I'm afraid that one of these days he may be missing. Okay, end of chapter 10. Hi! V is just a pro at being weird. Well, me too. We can be professionals at being weird together. How about that? I'm trying to center myself, but I don't know if it's working. Who says hi? I think we're all pros at that. I was yelling about my spine repeatedly yesterday and refusing to blink. I can go to like 8 different stores and buy a chambermaid outfit perfect for me right now. We need a model stream of that. Thank you again for those bits. Yeah, you probably do. Who's gonna model it though, V? The part-time model, we know. You've done more modeling gigs than me recently. Welcome for clapping. New billing statement. Woohoo! Monster applause. Oh, you want to say hi? No, she's forcibly looking down. Want to say hi? No, she's not into it. I don't know what this is. I'm a pro at being weird too. Okay. That's called voguing? Is it? Oh, this? I don't know. I'm working on it. I'm so Madonna. That's funny, because I never listened to Madonna. Who's like, what the F are you doing? Okay, I need to stop. Okay, chapter 11, an accident at sea. You mean Mr. Wormrath may attempt to kidnap Mr. Owen? Nancy gasped, startled at the thought. When an unscrupulous person finds himself cornered, he's apt to attempt almost anything in order to save his own skin, the lawyer responded dryly. Mr. Owen is getting on in years and should have someone to look after him. Why not advise him to employ a bodyguard until the trouble blows over? Oh, I have, but his only reply is stuff and nonsense. He can't seem to realize that we're dealing with a dangerous man. It's too bad he doesn't live here in Seacliff, Nancy remarked. If he would only come, you could keep an eye on him yourself, Dad, and I might help you. You'd like the job, wouldn't you? Her father teased. But I'm afraid Mr. Owen wouldn't feel flattered if he thought we believed him incapable of looking after himself. He needn't know everything, Really, I wish he would come here, Dad. Then I could find out if he's related to Mrs. Owen of River Heights. I suspected that was in your mind all the time, laughed her father. I meant to ask Mr. Owen for you, but we were so pressed with business matters that I forgot about it completely. I don't suppose you could bring Mr. Owen here? Nancy asked eagerly. Would it be possible to let him think you wish to consult him about the case? I'll consider the matter, her father promised with a smile. At luncheon, he told Nancy that he had sent a telegram to the man requesting him to come immediately to the Seaside Hotel. Before the meal was over, a reply had been received. Mr. Owen agreed to make the trip without delay. Remember, it was your idea, Mr. Drew reminded his daughter. So when I'm not around, you'll be responsible for Mr. Owen's safety. I'll guard him like a G-man, Nancy promised, laughing. What the heck does that mean? Bess, George, and I will never allow him out of our sight. Can somebody look that up? G-man? It's G-man. I don't know what they mean by that. Since it was not anticipated that Mr. Owen could arrive before the following morning, the girls accepted an invitation from Jack Kingdon to try ocean fishing in his motorboat. They were thrilled at the opportunity, for it would be the first time for that sport. The day was warm and the water smooth as glass. Jack complained that he was afraid the fish might refuse to strike, but the girls preferred the quiet sea to one which might have made them sick. Jack was an expert fisherman. He gave each of the girls a huge pole equipped with a large reel and a great length of line, then baited the hooks with raw meat. I ought to catch a whale with an outfit like this, George laughed. What shall I do if I get a strike? As the young man had predicted, the fish were not biting. Although the boat moved from one locality to another, the party had no luck. The girls did not mind it, however, for they were enjoying the beautiful day. Presently, a breeze arose, and Nancy noticed that the waves were lapping heavily against the boat. Looks as if a storm may be kicking up, Jack observed, scanning the clouds. As he steered toward shore, Nancy, hearing a droning noise above, turned her head to watch a passing seaplane. She followed it with her eyes until it was some distance away. Suddenly, she gave an excited cry. Why, it's landing! And in such rough water, Bess exclaimed in astonishment. I should think the pilot would be afraid his machine might upset. Anxiously, the young people looked on as the plane came down on the surface of the water. It struck heavily, then glided swiftly forward, veering crazily. That was a nice landing in such a rough sea, Jack murmured admiringly. But what's the matter with the pilot? He acts as if he were ill. Or else overcome by fumes, Nancy added tensely. They had seen the aviator slump, one arm dangling over the side. The passenger in the front cockpit signaled frantically to the occupants of the oncoming motorboat, his lips framing words they were unable to hear. They were sure he was calling for help, however. We'll be there in a minute, Jack yelled grimly, increasing the speed of the craft. The boat shot through the water, sending a cold spray flying into the faces of the girls. Nancy stood beside Jack at the wheel, her eyes glued upon the drifting seaplane. Should it turn broadside to a wave, she feared that the craft might fill up and become submerged. At that moment, she became aware that the pilot and his passenger were in even greater danger. A tongue of flame had shot up suddenly from the fuselage, revealing that fire had caused the forced landing of the ship. If the flames reach the gasoline supply, it will all be over in a flash, Jack murmured, his face tense. Plowing steadily through the rough water, the motorboat was still some distance from the drifting seaplane. The lone passenger, an elderly man, turned an appealing face toward his would-be rescuers. Help! Help! They heard him call. We'll never reach him in time, George murmured anxiously. The flames are spreading too fast. Apparently, the passenger was of the same opinion, believing that his only hope of saving himself and the pilot depended upon his own efforts. The young people saw him climb out of the cockpit he was in and struggle frantically to free the unconscious aviator behind him. Finally, he succeeded in pushing the man into the sea, then plunged after him. They'll both drown, Bess gasped in horror. However, the elderly man grasped the pilot by the hair in an effort to tow him away from the burning plane. He was a poor swimmer. Encumbered by water-soaked clothing and a heavy human weight, he made slight progress in the turbulent sea. The waves brought the flaming seaplane dangerously close to the men, while each deluge of water which broke over their heads temporarily buried them beneath the surface. The swimmer began to thrash the water and gasp for breath, an indication that he was weakening rapidly. "That old fellow has courage," Jack muttered. "He won't desert his helpless companion." "Can't you go faster?" Nancy pleaded. Jack did not answer. For just at that moment, Bess gave a low moan. "Oh, we're too late. They've gone under," she cried. That was very dramatic. G-Man. I miss the context, but that's what I typically know G-Man to be, an agent who works for the government. That swimmer needs to get good at swimming. Well, he's an old man. So, the quote was, "I'll guard him like a G-Man." Like in context of a bodyguard? Let's see what Half-Life. Okay, slang for government man. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, like a special agent. That would make sense. Okay, let's continue because there's no reason to stop in the midst of this drama. Chapter 12, A Courageous Passenger. A huge wave had buried the two men, and it did appear that they had gone under for the last time. But in a moment, Nancy and her friends caught a glimpse of a dark head just under the water's surface. "Can you handle the boat?" Jack asked Nancy tersely. She nodded and took over the wheel. The young man stood poised at the side, and as the boat made a wide sweep, he dived overboard. His plunge carried him close to the struggling figure, which was fighting so valiantly to keep the unconscious pilot afloat. A few powerful strokes brought him to a point directly behind the pair. Jack grasped the limp body of the aviator, but even when relieved of the burden, the older man seemed scarcely able to battle the heavy waves. "There's a lifebelt under the sea," Nancy directed George. "Get it quickly." The girl flew to obey, and as her chum jockeyed the boat into position, she threw the life preserver toward the struggling man. It fell some feet short, but he was able to swim on until he could grasp the support. He clung tightly to it, gasping for breath. By this time, Nancy had throttled down the motor and was able to bring the boat alongside of Jack and the aviator. The girls pulled the unconscious man aboard, leaving young Kingdon free to return for the exhausted swimmer. In a few minutes, the bedraggled pair likewise were pulled aboard. "Good work, Nancy," Jack murmured admiringly as he took over the wheel again. Relieved of duty at the helm, the Drew girl lost no time in attending to the needs of the pilot and his unfortunate passenger. George and Bess were doing the best they could, but were frightened and unable to work calmly. "Ask Jack if there are any blankets and a first aid kit aboard," Nancy called, taking command. One glance assured her that the passenger, though cold and exhausted, required no immediate treatment. It was the pilot who gave her grave concern. She knelt beside him and gently removed the heavy headgear which had weighed him down in the water. His face was as white as chalk, and he seemed scarcely to breathe. "Shouldn't we start artificial respiration?" Bess asked anxiously. Nancy shook her head. "I'll watch his pulse, and unless it gets feebler, I don't believe we'll need to do anything more before we get to shore." "He must have inhaled fumes from the engine in some way," Bess murmured, staring down at the pinched face. By this time, George returned with some blankets and a warm coat for Jack, who was shivering at the wheel. The girls then wrapped up the pilot. "The fellow appears almost as if he were doped with a drug," Nancy said, half to herself. "I've never before seen anyone look as he does. We must take him to a doctor." "I'm making full speed ahead for shore," Jack reported grimly. Finding a thermos bottle of coffee, Nancy urged the old man to take a few sips of it. "It will give you strength and make you feel better," she urged. He obediently swallowed some of the hot brew, and as the girl slipped an arm about him for support, she had an opportunity opportunity to study his face. She judged him to be about 62. He had iron gray hair, a kindly countenance, and dark, intelligent eyes, which denoted quiet courage. "You were very brave to try saving the pilot," she told him, "but it nearly cost you your own life." "I couldn't let the fellow go down in that burning plane," the man muttered. "I had to help him." "What caused the accident?" Nancy asked quickly. "I don't know. The first thing I realized, the pilot had started to land on the water, said he felt sick and stupid. We struck heavily, and I guess he fainted before he could cut the switches. Anyway, the machine burst into flames." "You both had a very narrow escape from death," said Nancy. "Yes," the elderly man agreed soberly. "We owe our lives to the timely arrival of your motorboat. How is the pilot?" "He's very ill," Nancy answered. "I can't understand." Her voice trailed off, and she did not mention again that it seemed to her that the man might have been drugged. The motorboat had traveled some distance from the flaming seaplane, but the blaze had attracted the attention of persons on shore. Word went around that a pleasure craft had exploded. The Coast Guards arrived upon the scene, ready to set out for the place of the accident. At the seaside hotel, Carson Drew heard of the occurrence, but was unable to learn any of the details. Fearing that Nancy and her friends might have been involved, he ran down to the beach to join the crowd that had gathered there. Following a record run to shore, the motorboat drew up to the pier. Carson Drew recognized his daughter and tried to push through the excited throng to meet her, but it was several minutes before he could do so. The Coast Guard men boarding the craft immediately took charge of the unconscious pilot. "We'll rush him straight to the hospital," they told Nancy, and added a few words of sincere praise for the young people's rescue work. "I hope the poor fellow will be all right," Nancy replied anxiously. "I can't understand what's wrong with him." The Coast Guard men, well trained in all types of first aid, were likewise puzzled by the reaction of the insensible man. However, they offered no opinion. As they left the scene, Mr. Drew succeeded in reaching the young people. "Dad!" Nancy cried joyfully, grasping his hand. "Why, you're trembling!" Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get new music here.
If you manage a team, you have to try Monday.com. Monday.com is a platform to track.
"Who wouldn't be?" he demanded gruffly. "I was afraid it was your boat that had blown up. I thought—" "Mr. Carson Drew?" a voice interrupted. Nancy and her father turned and saw that the rescued passenger, supported on either side by Jack Kingdon and Bess, had come up directly behind them. He was gazing at the lawyer with an expression of pleased recognition. For a moment, Carson Drew stared blankly. "Charles Owen!" he exclaimed at last. "I didn't expect you to be in Seacliff until tomorrow." Yep, that was the end of chapter 11. Now that was the end of chapter 12. Yeah, it just Googles it. So, when I had Nightbot stuff, which I technically still have some Nightbot stuff, I had it set up with Urban Dictionary, but I think Googling it actually just makes it easier, because then you can just get you can search for anything and not just slang. "Never let go, Jack," Nancy said, letting Jack go. Thought the struggling man was named Jack. Oopsie doopsie. Okay, I've listened to this one so many times. I'm just gonna go... No, I'm gonna... Try this. See, the errors in my way. That would be so terrifying, things catching fire. But fire is fun! Fun with fire! Oh yeah, an AD my jam. What? Okay, this is more what I wanted originally. This is called gaijin, which, if you know anything about Japanese, you know is like the not very nice term to call foreigners. So, fun, quick Japanese lesson. So, gaikokujin is the full term for a foreigner, but Japanese people will shorten it and just say gaijin. And a lot of like expats and students will refer to themselves as gaijin. So it's kind of derogatory, especially if a Japanese person says it. But I like the art. This is cool. Do you guys want to see this? Here. I just want to show you. Do you see the art here? I like it. It's cute. He has a little kendo practice sword. Anyways. You're getting so much done. Plus some UD definitions are big yikes. Yeah, that's true. Because Urban Dictionary means 90% of words need a sexual act attached to them. Yes. AD My Jam as the ad came on. Oh, an ad. My Jam. I catch you every time you yawn. Boo-boo's so cute. Boo-boo's so cute. You need your own camera for stream, although you'd hate that. She knows when I'm trying to take pictures of her, and she hates it. She tries to avoid it. Cameras make Boo yawn. Probably true. She looks so funny when she yawns, though. Hello, Bo. Hi, Riddy. Welcome back. Yeah, now she's turning away. Like, no, Mom. Don't put me on camera. We have this voice for Boo. I don't know if it's accurate, though. E is streaming Mario Galaxy... Super Mario Galaxy, which I've never played, but yeah. Okay, shall we continue? Chapter 13, An Act of the Enemy. I thought I'd surprise you and come by plane. Oh, I have to have my old man voice. I thought I'd surprise you and come by plane, Mr. Owen returned, smiling. At the last minute, I changed my mind and decided to swim in. I took you for an Indian chief in that blanket. That's really bad. Mr. Drew replied, and the other's light feigned. There his face instantly sobered. I don't know what happened out there on the water, but I can see you're shivering with cold, Mr. Owen. There'll be enough time to talk when we're at the hotel. Hi, Marone! Welcome! Okay, I'm gonna keep reading, but hi. He went on ahead, making a pathway through the crowd. The party was rushed to the seaside hotel, where both the old gentleman and Jack Kingdon were given dry clothing. Although Mr. Owen insisted he felt little the worse for his ducking in the sea, his face was pale, and the young people knew that only his remarkable willpower was sustaining him. The lawyer wisely insisted upon sending the man to bed, and calling in a nurse to look after him for a few days. I don't need a nurse, the old gentleman complained. You're my responsibility here at Seacliff, Carson Drew said severely. I don't want you to die of pneumonia. Wow. I reckon you couldn't collect your fee then, Mr. Owen chuckled, but obediently went to bed. Nancy remained with the old gentleman until the nurse should arrive, but she could not keep him quiet. If the other young lady is half as nice as you, this won't be so bad, he chuckled. Nancy flushed at the compliment. You mustn't tire yourself by talking too much, she warned, smiling. Maybe I'll tire other folks with my jabbering, but not myself. I want to tell you that I appreciate being pulled out of the water, too. I couldn't have held out much longer. It was George who tossed you the life preserver, Nancy replied. But I keep worrying all the time about that poor pilot. Yes, it's a mystery to me what was wrong with him, Mr. Owen muttered. He was taken ill so suddenly. Mr. Drew had entered the bedroom again. He pulled up a chair and at the first opportunity endeavored to speak seriously to his client. You had a fortunate escape from death today, Mr. Owen, he began. Next time you may not be so lucky. Next time? Mr. Owen demanded, sitting up very straight against the pillows. I don't figure there will be a next time. Just what are you driving at, Mr. Drew? Has it occurred to you that what happened this afternoon may not have been an accident at all? You think Wormrath was back of it? The client asked quickly. Yes. What reason have you for thinking the man would go to such lengths? Mr. Owen questioned. Wormrath fears exposure, the lawyer said quietly. He does not know how much evidence we have against him, and I imagine he believes we are in possession of more than we actually have gathered. Only a day ago, my room was entered and valuable papers in this case stolen. Mr. Drew then told how Nancy had recovered the documents from Dincher. Wormrath and his hirelings will do anything to prevent the damage suit from coming into court, the lawyer added. Perhaps I exaggerate, but it is my honest opinion your life is in danger, Mr. Owen. The elderly man did not speak for several minutes. He seemed to be mulling matters over in his mind. Perhaps you're right about it, Mr. Drew, he admitted slowly. I've learned that you usually have the correct slant on things. I'll take your advice and be on my guard. It means you must remain in your hotel for a few days, advised the lawyer. Mr. Owen made a slight grimace, but promised that he would abide by his friend's judgment. When the nurse came to take charge of the case, Nancy and her father went to the latter's room to talk over matters privately. There was every indication, I think, the girl declared, that the pilot was doped. I imagine that Wormrath plotted to wreck the plane, thinking that no one ever would be able to prove anything against him. I shall investigate that angle thoroughly, Mr. Drew nodded. I'm on my way now to see the doctor who is attending the aviator. After the lawyer left the hotel, Nancy and her chums found time hanging heavily upon their hands. We really should give Togo a little exercise, Nancy remarked. We've neglected him shamefully the past few days. Let's go for a hike now, George proposed impulsively. We can get back in time for dinner, and there's nothing to do here. Haven't you had enough excitement for one day? Bess asked. She was tired and preferred to remain in her room with a good book. Oh, hike will be helpful for us all, George laughed. Come along, lazy. Selecting a road which took them to the outskirts of Seacliff, the girls soon were walking along briskly with Togo scampering ahead of them. He kept tugging impatiently at his leash, so Nancy unfastened it and let the little dog have more freedom. He'll probably get into mischief, Bess ventured to say, but Nancy did not feel that it was right to keep the pet confined all the time. Oh, Togo is a good dog now, she laughed. You forget that I've been training him. Maybe he'll forget it too, George said dryly. Presently, the girls approached a tourist camp, and Nancy remarked that it was the one where they had searched for Miss Morse. The place held no interest for them now, and they were just passing by when Nancy suddenly clutched George's hand. Isn't that Joe Mitza? She asked in a whisper, indicating a man who had at that moment entered the park. Before either George or Bess could catch a glimpse of his face, the fellow moved on through the entrance gate. I'm almost certain it was Mitza, Nancy insisted, growing excited. Come on, girls, let's find out what he's doing here. The three chums hastened to the entrance of the park in time to see Joe Mitza greet a man who evidently was staying in one of the cabins. The pair sat down on a bench and began to talk. Let's steal up behind the cabin and hear what they're saying, Nancy proposed. The camp was nearly deserted, and no one paid any attention to the girls as they retraced their steps, circled the park, and crept up behind the tourist shack. Mitza was boasting to his friend of various disreputable exploits. As he mentioned Miss Morse's name, a note of complaint came into his harsh voice. I figured the old lady was an easy mark, but she fooled me. I thought I had everything lined up to make some money, but yesterday when I went to collect it, she said she'd have to do a little more thinking. What I'm trying to decide is whether she's just cautious or if someone has squealed on me. You'll end up in jail one of these days, the other replied shortly. Not Joe Mitza, the fellow boasted. And I'll get the 5,000 from old Miss Morse yet. Maybe I did underestimate her shrewdness, but I'll think up a better scheme next time. You wait and see. I'll have the money jingling around in my pockets before another day passes. The other man seemed rather unimpressed by Mitza's talk, and Nancy wondered if it might not be because he had listened to the trickster's cheap boasting before. The fellow may only be a braggart, he decided. Since Miss Morse seems well able to take care of herself, there's probably little use in notifying the authorities again. When the conversation changed to a new topic, the girls moved quietly away. They returned to the entrance gate of the park and sauntered in boldly. They intended to accost Mitza and see how he would act. The two men were so engrossed in their conversation that they did not observe the girls until they were directly opposite the bench on which they were sitting. Nancy pretended to be surprised at seeing Mitza once more, although she was highly amused to note the fellow's dismay. Why, how fortunate that we should meet again, she said, smiling disarmingly. If you're still after Miss Morse's address, the man cut in curtly, I can't give it to you. I haven't seen the old lady since I reached Seacliff. Nancy knew this to be a deliberate falsehood, but before she could decide just what tack to take next, Togo solved the problem for her. He made a sudden playful dart at Mitza. Thinking that the dog intended to bite him, the fellow sprang backward and in his fright allowed a letter to drop from his hand. Mitza kicked savagely at Togo and stooped to pick up the communication, but Nancy was too quick for him. She retrieved the missive first and did not hesitate to glance at it. In the upper left-hand corner, a name and address stood out in bold writing. It read, Miss Fanny Morse, Box 14, Seacliff. End of chapter 13. I want to save this. You're in pain, Moreau. I am sorry to hear that too. It's gonna be a few weeks. Kind of got hit by... Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw that on Twitter. I meant to say something, but I've been like in and out of Twitter and missing my notifications. But anyways, I don't know if you're still here. You said be right back, but gosh, I hope. Yeah, I hope your pain eases and you're able to take care of yourself and get healed. And it was a hit and run, right? Which is crazy, and I'm sorry you have to deal with that. That's not right. Jangle money? What? This sounds very Animal Crossing-y. That's very chill. This is exactly what I was looking for earlier. Hey, Boo Boo, what are you doing? She's sitting. You said that the money would jangle in the pockets. Oh. What are you doing, Boo Boo? Saying hi to everybody? Say hi. Say hi, Marome. I hope you feel better. Like, no, Mom. Now. She's so silly. Hi, angry looking. She always looks angry. Even when she's purring and happy, she still looks angry. Sorry. Probably angry because I haven't been with her all day. I was at work. Then I had PT. She's looking the other way. She's giving me the silent treatment. Hey, Boo Boo. Boo Boo. My nose, Boo. Boo. Yeah, Yeah, she's ignoring me. I don't know what happened, but my back is hurting now. I'm just gonna assume that I stretched something when I did PT today, and it just stretched the muscles and now it's sore, but yeah, can't say it feels great. Still have not heard. Still have not heard from Keegan. I'll have to tell this to HS, but so, you know how libraries do summer reading programs or whatever, except this time we wanted to call our summer learning program because you can get points by going to programs at the library, not just reading. But, so our community goal was 1,000,000 points, which was 1,000,000 minutes of reading done. And we had all summer to do it, and we've already accomplished that. And I've probably reached my goal, but I haven't counted it. But I'll get there. I get to pick out a free book if I finish. And I also, because I'm an adult, get to enter a raffle for a gift basket. No, he should be fine. He's just at work. So I'm sure he's busy and has not let me... He may be in a meeting, I don't know. He's just not told me when he wants to be picked up. Okay. Chapter 14. Help from Togo. Give me that letter, Joe Mitza cried furiously. With a scornful smile, Nancy extended it for him to take, but as the man reached out his hand, a strong gust of wind carried the envelope away. Togo took up the pursuit, pounced upon the note, and began to tear at it with his sharp teeth. Confound that mutt! Mitza exclaimed angrily. Snatching up a heavy stick, he beat the dog until Togo dropped the letter. Yelping with pain, the animal tried to run away, but the man held him by the collar and whipped him cruelly. Boo was disturbed. Animal abuse. Stop that! Nancy ordered, darting forward. Don't you dare strike my dog! She caught Mitza by the arm and pulled the fellow away from Togo. He pushed her roughly aside. George and Bess joined the fray, and the three girls managed to rescue the dog, but not before he had bitten Mitza's finger a little. Serves him right. That beast ought to be shot! The man shouted furiously. He ruined my letter, and now look what he's done to my hand. You brought it upon yourself, I'm afraid, Nancy replied coldly. By this time, many persons, attracted by Togo's yelps of pain, had gathered at the scene. Mitza was regarded unsympathetically by all who had witnessed the affair. Where's my letter? He demanded, looking about him. In the melee, it had been torn into several pieces and trampled into the dirt. The wind had carried the bits of paper in every direction. I guess there's nothing left of it, Bess said shortly. Nancy had seen two of the scattered bits of paper lodged in a tiny evergreen tree nearby, but she did not reveal the fact. She meant to retrieve them herself after Mitza had gone. I ought to call the police, the man blustered, destroying a valuable letter. Why don't you notify the local officers? Nancy challenged. I think it would be a good idea. Mitza gave the girl a sharp glance. Then he quickly went off, nursing his injured hand and muttering to himself. Served him right to be bitten, said a woman who had witnessed the affair. That was me. He had no excuse to abuse the dog. That man is a deadbeat, and as worthless as a fellow could be. Do you know him? Nancy inquired alertly. Decidedly. He owes me a bill of nearly $10, and all for food. I run the Florence restaurant here at the park. Has Mitza been eating without paying? Yes. He orders everything on the menu and then pretends he'll pay for it the next day. He claimed his wealthy father was sending him a check, but that it had been delayed. Delayed permanently, I imagine, Nancy commented dryly. I guess I'll go after him right now and threaten to turn him over to the police, the woman announced. I'll not let him cheat me. She was moving away when Nancy remembered to ask if anyone answering Miss Morse's description ever took her meals at the Florence restaurant. I don't recall such a person. We have a great many customers in a day, the woman replied regretfully, and I'd hardly remember anyone unless he was outstanding in some way. After the restaurant owner had gone and the crowd had melted away, Nancy went to the little evergreen tree and searched for the pieces torn from Joe Mitz's letter. I'm almost positive the note was from Miss Morse, she told her chums. Her box number was on the envelope, but I can't be sure of it now. Here's one of the pieces, Bess cried out triumphantly, picking it up from the ground. It seems to be a part of the envelope. Luck favored the girls. Although the scrap of paper was only a tiny one, it bore the notation Box 14. Now I'll be able to get in touch with Miss Morse, Nancy declared, highly elated. The girls searched for some minutes in the vicinity and finally discovered another portion of the letter which had blown into a flower bed. What does it say? George demanded eagerly, peering over Nancy's shoulder. I'll come at night with the 5,000, Nancy read aloud. Oh dear, this seems to indicate that the old lady intends to go through with some sort of deal with Mitza. Where are they to meet, do you suppose? Beth speculated. If only we had seen all of the letter. Let's try to find a few more scraps, Nancy suggested. Perhaps we'll be able to piece the thing together. Although the girls searched diligently, they were unable to locate other portions of the letter. As they were looking under the porch of a tourist cabin, an elderly man with a cane came walking slowly down the cinder path. He paused to watch the girls curiously. Did you lose anything? He inquired in a friendly tone. Only a piece of paper, Nancy replied, straightening up to gaze at the old gentleman. He was an interesting type, agile and active despite his age, which one might guess to be about 70. Could this be what you're looking for? The old man pointed his cane toward a scrap of soiled wrapping paper lying on the ground. I'm afraid not, Nancy answered, returning his warm smile. The old man sat down on a bench nearby. Very shortly, he introduced himself as Mr. Albin and struck up a friendly conversation, revealing to his young listeners that his father originally had owned all the ground upon which the town of Seacliff stood. Until 10 years ago, this park was a part of my farm, he declared reminiscently. I like to walk down here on sunny days, sort of thinking back on the good old times. I guess probably you've heard of the Albins. My ancestors settled here way back in 1712, and there's been an Albin in Seacliff ever since. You must know nearly everyone here then, Nancy commented thoughtfully. There was a time when I did, but not anymore. Seacliff has grown too fast for me the past few years, but I know all the old-timers. Did you ever hear of the Conger family? Nancy inquired. Fred Conger was one of my best friends. Why, the last few years of his life he used to come to my house nearly every day, and we would work on ship models together. Fred made one of an old-fashioned brig, which was the neatest piece of work I ever saw. It took over a year to make it. He said that when it should be finished, I should have it. But he didn't live long enough to fulfill his promise. Where is the ship now? In the old Conger homestead, decaying with the rest of the furnishings. Great pity, too, for Conger loved beautiful things and believed in taking care of them. I'm partly responsible for the way matters turned out. I blame myself. Nancy gazed at the old gentleman in astonishment. You're to blame, Mr. Alvin? The Drew girl asked. Yes, the old man sighed. I knew how Fred loved his daughter, Bernice. In trying to soften the blow of her elopement, I made a sad botch of things. I don't understand, Nancy murmured. Mr. Albin hesitated, and the girl sensed that it was a painful ordeal for him to tell them more, but he said quietly, You see, Fred kept hoping in the last years of his life that he would get some word from his daughter. He felt certain she would write and tell him she was returning home. He talked almost constantly of her. I don't know actually what became of the girl, but she caused her poor father untold grief. After a while, I couldn't stand it to see Fred suffer as he did. It was a bit dishonest of me, I know, but a few years before his death, I arranged to have postcards sent from various European ports, all of them signed Love, Bernice. And Mr. Conjure believed they came from his daughter? Bess asked softly. Yes, whenever he received a card, he would be happy for days. Why, everything considered, I think that was a very kind thing for you to do, George remarked. I don't think so, because you're giving him false hope, and you're basically lying to him. The old man shook his head. I thought so too at first, but after Fred died, I learned that he had left all his property in trust to his daughter, confidently believing her to be alive. The bank cannot close up the estate until she is found, and in the meantime, the grand old place has fallen into ruin. You believe Bernice Conjure is dead? Nancy asked thoughtfully. I don't know, the old man answered slowly. But if she is still alive, I'm afraid she'll never return here. Oh, it's a pity to see that fine old estate in such wretched condition. A pity. You shouldn't blame yourself, Nancy said kindly. You thought you were acting for the best. I didn't mean to do wrong, it's true, but that doesn't excuse me. Oh, I worry about it day and night. Does anyone here in Seacliff know about the postcards? George questioned. The old man looked startled. That was the end of chapter 14. Yeah, that was violent. Welcome for clapping. Hey, boo-boo. Boo-boo. What you drinking? Green tea with mango? Oh, Keegan says yes to 5:30. Sonic! Gotta drink fast. Hi, boo. I think she's a little weirded out by my... How many more chapters are there? Let's see, we're on chapter 15. So counting chapter 15, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 chapters. So, claps late, that's fine. Welcome for clapping late. Okay, so late claps are still great. It does have a lot of chapters. This is the original version, so it's significantly longer than the rewrite. Okay, chapter 15. A page from the past. He glanced nervously at the girls, and they noticed a stray tear trickling down his furrowed cheek. No, today is the first time I ever told anyone. I shouldn't have talked so much. Promise, you'll never repeat the story, he pleaded. Have no fear, we'll surely guard your secret, Nancy answered sympathetically. Oh, thank you, the old man murmured gratefully. Without a word of farewell, he arose and moved slowly away. Returning to the seaside hotel, Nancy and her chums were greeted in the lobby by Mr. Drew. George and Bess went directly to their room. After they had gone, the lawyer took his daughter aside for a quiet talk. I have news of the seaplane pilot, Nancy. I spent nearly an hour at the hospital today talking with the doctors as well as the patient. Then the man has recovered consciousness? Nancy asked eagerly. Yes. When I saw him, he seemed little the worse for what he went through. Apparently, you were right about the fellow having been drugged. The doctors feel certain of it, and I learned from the aviator that shortly before he took off in the seaplane, a stranger accosted him. They struck up a friendly conversation, and the man treated him to a lunch with coffee. "Dropping a few pills into the coffee, I suppose," said Nancy. "So it would seem. While it is impossible to gain absolute evidence, in my own mind, I'm convinced that worm wrath is at the bottom of the matter. Have you told Mr. Owen about what you learned?" "Not yet. The nurse said he wasn't feeling as well as he was at first. Shock, I suppose. If you have a few minutes to spare, Nancy, you might run up to his room." "I'll be glad to, Dad," she promised, "just as soon as I've written a letter." Nancy then told her father of her experience at the tourist park and the manner in which she had gained Miss Morse's address. I intend to write her immediately," she declared, "but I'm afraid even now it may be too late. From the bit of letter I found, I gather she intends to hand over the $5,000 to Mitza very shortly." Parson Drew nodded, scarcely heeding what his daughter was saying, for his mind was firmly fixed upon the Owen Wormrath case. Nancy had intended to seek his advice, but realizing that he did not wish to be bothered just then, she said no more. Instead, she wrote a brief note to Miss Morse in which she told the woman of the suitcase still being at the hotel, and warning her to beware of Mitza. "I've done practically all I can now," she thought as she sealed the letter and dropped it into the mailbox. "I only hope it reaches Miss Morse in time to prevent her from acting rashly." Feeling that an important duty had been accomplished, Nancy next called at Mr. Owen's room and was admitted by the nurse. "How's the patient?" the girl inquired in a low tone. "He's sleeping just at the moment," the nurse replied, leading Nancy to the bedside. "He suffered a temporary relapse about 3 hours ago, but his sleep is natural now. When he awakens, I believe he will be very nearly back to normal." Nancy sat down by the bed while the nurse lay down on a cot nearby. "Perhaps you would like to take a little walk out in the sunshine," Nancy presently suggested. "Mr. Owen's sleeping, and I don't mind staying with him." The young woman thanked Nancy for her kindness, saying that she would enjoy a breath of fresh air. "I'll not be gone more than 15 minutes, she promised, closing the door softly as she went out. Nancy picked up a magazine and started to read, but scarcely had she turned the first page when Mr. Owen's eyelids opened. He gazed blankly about the room for a moment, then smiled at the girl. "How do you feel, Mr. Owen?" she asked. "Oh, much better, the man replied. "I feel as if I could eat a big meal. Do you suppose you could smuggle in a T-bone steak for me with French fried potatoes and a pot of coffee?" "I'm afraid I couldn't until the nurse returns and says it'll be all right," Nancy smiled. "You mustn't tire yourself by talking either, Mr. Owen." "Nonsense! There's no sense in trying to make an invalid of me. Well, if I'm ordered not to talk, then you must do it for me. I might tell you about my dog Togo," the girl laughed, probing her mind for a topic which would amuse the man. She related the terrier's many mischievous little tricks and revealed how the dog had come into her possession. At first, Nancy did not mention Mrs. Owen's name, although she longed to do so, but she feared that the patient might become excited. However, she was overcome with curiosity to learn if the clubwoman were related to Mr. Owen, and finally broached the subject. "Oh yes, I must tell you about a curious coincidence," she said casually, watching the man closely. "The woman whose pocketbook Togo dropped in the lake had the same name you have." "Owen?" the man asked in surprise. "Yes. I don't suppose you're related to anyone in my state, are you?" "Well, not to my knowledge. The truth is, I have very few relatives anywhere. I'm practically alone in the world." Mr. Owen lapsed into moody silence, gazing meditatively out of the window. Nancy realized that unwittingly she had reminded him of an unhappy phase of his life, and wished that she had refrained from broaching the subject. "My wife died many years ago," Mr. Owen murmured, speaking as if to himself. "At that time I was traveling in Borneo. I had gone into the interior and did not even know that she was ill. I did not reach this country until several months after her death." "A sad homecoming," Nancy said sympathetically. "Shortly after reaching the United States, I was stricken with a fever," Mr. Owen continued. "I spent 6 months in a hospital. When I finally reached Chicago, broken in health and hopelessly discouraged, I found our former home occupied by another family. No one could tell me where my wife had been buried. Had you no friends in the city? None. We had lived there only a month when I left for Borneo. After what happened, I could not bear to remain in Chicago. I went to Wyndham, and after years of struggle began to prosper in the silk and woolen business. I suppose you would call me a successful man now, but my life is empty and desolate. I'd give everything I owned to see Alice just once again. Alice? Nancy inquired quickly. Was that the name of your wife? Yes, Alice Lenore. She was a very handsome woman. I was just thinking, Nancy murmured, before she stopped to consider the effect her words might produce, that the Mrs. Owen of my acquaintance easily could be named Alice too. What was that? Mr. Owen demanded sharply. He grasped Nancy's wrist, the fingers pressing into her flesh so hard that it hurt her. I don't really know Mrs. Owen's first name, Nancy assured him quickly, but I did chance to see a newspaper clipping which she kept in her pocketbook. It read, Rexy, come home. All is forgiven. Alice. A strange light suddenly came into the patient's eyes, and a bright flush crept over his pallid cheeks. He still gripped Nancy's wrist.
Nicely done.
Are you sure? He rasped, fairly beside himself with subdued excitement. Those were the exact words? Why, yes, I'm almost certain of it, Mr. Owen. Did you ever know anyone named Rexy? Rexy was my middle name, but I can't understand it. My wife's dead. She couldn't have inserted the advertisement in the paper, and yet the names, Rexy and Alice. Tell me, is Mrs. Owen a woman of middle age? I should judge her to be around 60. Alice was only 2 years younger than myself, and I'm 62 now, Mr. Owen murmured. Tell me, is your friend a handsome woman? I should consider her so, Nancy answered, and described Mrs. Owen to the best of her ability. She is my wife! My Alice! Mr. Owen cried, throwing aside the bed covers. There's been some terrible mistake! She must be alive, and I'm going to her! It required all of Nancy's strength to keep Mr. Owen in bed. He struggled and tried to resist her as she placed the covers over him. Don't try to keep me away from my wife! We've been separated so many years. I must go to her. You're in no condition to travel now, Nancy insisted. Why wouldn't it be better to send a telegram to Mrs. Owen and find out if she really is your wife? Yes, send her a wire at once, Mr. Owen urged. Bring me paper and pencil and I'll write it now. Nancy was sorry that she had broached the subject of the newspaper clipping. While she was elated over the relationship which appeared to exist between the two persons, she realized that Mr. Owen was too excited for his own good. She feared that he might have a relapse, particularly if it should develop that the club woman was not his wife after all. It doesn't seem possible that my Alice may still be alive, the man mumbled as he scribbled a few lines on the paper Nancy handed him. And yet her death was never actually confirmed. Oh, I don't dare hope for such good fortune. We'll soon know the truth, Nancy replied soothingly. Until then, you must remain calm and prepare yourself for a possible disappointment. Will you send the wire right away? Mr. Owen pleaded. Yes, this very instant. Nancy telephoned the local telegraph office, repeating the message as Mr. Owen had written it. How long will it take before we can receive a reply? The man asked nervously. Oh, several hours at least. You must try to rest, Mr. Owen. I can't rest until I know the truth. Oh, if only I dared hope. The patient began to roll and toss on the bed, throwing his head about restlessly. Once he tried to get up, and Nancy had to restrain him forcibly. Wish the nurse would return, she said to herself anxiously. Even to the girl's untrained eye, it was evidence that the man had taken a turn for the worse. Her conscience troubled her, for she realized that she had been the cause of the relapse. Didn't intend to excite him, she comforted herself. I only wanted to help him. Just then the door opened and the nurse entered. Without removing her hat, she rushed to the bedside. What have you done to him? She demanded angrily of Nancy. Nothing, the girl murmured contritely. We talked and you've excited him. That's what you've done. Oh, I shouldn't have left him for a minute. Call a doctor at once, then go away and don't allow anyone to enter this room. It was a new experience for Nancy to be ordered about, but she accepted the reprimand meekly. She flew to the telephone, and since she did not know the name of the local doctor, she asked the house physician to come upstairs immediately. I shouldn't have spoken so harshly, the nurse apologized. I'm sure it wasn't your fault. But it was, Nancy replied, accepting full responsibility. I'll go away now. She slipped out into the hall and was standing just outside the door as her father came down the carpeted corridor. How's Mr. Owen? He inquired cheerfully, and was startled to glimpse Nancy's downcast face. He's not worse? Yes, he is, Dad, and I'm the cause of it too. Oh, I feel very contrite. After listening to her account of the conversation with the sick man, Mr. Drew did not spare his daughter's feelings. It was a very foolish thing to do, Nancy. In the first place, you're far from certain that Mrs. Owen is my client's wife. Such a supposition sounds a bit preposterous to me. But everything tallies, Nancy Drew protested, moved to defend herself. Mr. Owen's nickname is Rexy, and his wife's name was Alice. Even so, you should have known better. Alice Owen is a fairly common name. You've led Mr. Owen to hope that his wife may be alive. Now, if he learns it all a mistake, I shudder to think of the result. You mean, he might die? Nancy gasped, completely shaken. I didn't realize he was so ill. He seems strong and cheerful. Mr. Owen has a powerful will, Carson Drew replied grimly, but he has a weak heart. You meant well, Nancy, but this time I'm afraid that in your great zeal to solve mysteries, you have overstepped yourself. What can I do, Dad? The girl asked unhappily. There's nothing anyone can do, her father returned gravely. We must wait for the reply to your telegram and hope that the news will be favorable. Jeez. That's the end of chapter 15. Yes, apparently I'm a time traveler. I'm talented at that. I also feel as though I need to throw a T-bone steak and coffee. Yeah, that was very emotional. Are you my wife? Your lips are chapped. Do you not have chapstick? Am I the next Doctor Who? No. I've never even seen Doctor Who. I'm gonna see if I can do one more chapter. How long is it? Nah, I'm gonna leave it there, I think. Well, no, I don't know. I'll go ahead and try one more chapter. The current Doctor Who is a lady? Okay. Alright, let's try one more chapter. Chapter 16, Nancy's Mistake. In a few minutes, the doctor arrived with his black bag and immediately was admitted to Mr. Owen's room. Nancy hovered nervously in the hallway.
I'm selective about whom I'll work for. I simply have no other choice.
I see. Then let me ask you one question.
I'm just gonna skip that. Okay. Nearly half an hour elapsed before the physician emerged. When the girl observed his grave face, it required all her courage to ask him about the patient's condition. Mr. Owen has been greatly overstimulated, the doctor replied, and his heart is weak. But if he suffers no further shock, I look for an improvement within a day or two. Nancy went away meekly to find Bess and George. I feel dreadful about what I did, she confided after she had told them what she had done. Everyone blames me for Mr. Owen's relapse, and I deserve it. I was so eager to prove the relationship between the couple that I didn't consider the effect my words might have upon Mr. Owen, should my theory prove false. But if you're right, Nancy, the reunion will be wonderful, Bess said kindly. Yes, but it's almost too much to expect that Mrs. Owen could be the that Mrs. Owen could be the missing wife of my father's client. Mr. Owen is certain she died years ago. It doesn't seem as if there could be a mistake, and yet I keep hoping. Try not to think any more about it until the telegram comes, George urged, for she saw that Nancy was greatly upset with worry. You acted with the best of intentions, and I'm sure no one suspected that Mr. Owen was in such a nervous condition. Results are all that count, not good intentions, Nancy said gloomily. If Mr. Owen should die, I'll be responsible. Oh, now you're getting morbid, Bess cut in. Mr. Owen won't die. He might, Nancy insisted. If the telegram is unfavorable, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if he should. I'm sure it's not as serious as all that, George said cheerfully. Do stop worrying, Nancy, and tell me what you're wearing to the dance tonight. Dance? You've not forgotten? Bess questioned in astonishment. We promised Jack we'd go to the party this evening at the country club. Oh, I did forget. Can't go now. But it's a dinner dance, Bess reminded her. Our reservations are made. It isn't really fair to Jack to back out now. I suppose I'll have to go since I promised, Nancy consented reluctantly. But with Mr. Owen so ill, it doesn't seem right. When Jack called for the girls later that evening, he sensed immediately that something was amiss. He too became downcast when he learned of Mr. Owen's condition. Everyone tried to be cheerful and entered into the spirit of festivities, but the entertainment had lost its zest for them all. The dinner which preceded it was excellent, yet Nancy made only a pretense of eating. Later in the ballroom, she danced mechanically, and more than once was compelled to apologize because she had failed to follow an intricate step. I don't know what the matter is with me, she said to Jack as she danced a waltz with him. I'm ruining your entire evening. You're worried, Nancy, and I don't blame you a bit. This isn't much of a party anyway. What do you say we cut it and go for a spin in my car? The other girls won't mind. They're having a good time. Where's Ned? I'd love it, Jack. A little fresh air may clear my mind. It was delightful to motor swiftly over the paved road, the breeze blowing against their faces. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Nancy observed, Isn't this the road which leads to Old Estate? Yes, her companion nodded. We're almost at the Conjure place now. When we reach the crest of the next knoll, you'll be able to see the grounds. Everything looks different at night. The car moved over the tiny hill, and Nancy turned her head to gaze in the direction Jack indicated. Would you like to stop and take another look at the whispering statue? He inquired. Oh, not tonight, Jack. We must be getting back to the clubhouse soon. But are you certain that is the Conjure Estate? Why, of course, Nancy. You're not accustomed to the way it looks at night, but I know this road like a veteran bus driver. There's a light over there where you pointed, Nancy insisted. The Conjure Estate is deserted. Jack slowed down the car so that he might glance more carefully toward the grounds which were shadowed behind a pine grove. I don't see any light, Nancy. It's the Conjure Estate, all right. I've passed it dozens of times. I'm certain I saw a light. It's gone now. Young Kingdon brought the automobile to a halt by the roadside not far from the private entrance to the grounds. Where did you see it? He questioned. Why, back among the trees. It seemed to come from the side of the old house. The light flashed 3 times. You're certain you saw it, Nancy? Yes, indeed. I believe it was a signal of some sort. I can't imagine who would be prowling about the place at this time of night, Jack said thoughtfully. I guess I'll walk up there and look around. I'll go with you. No, stay here in the car, Jack replied. I might run into trouble. If I don't return in 10 minutes, you come after me. Or better still, go for help. Nancy did not like such an arrangement. She greatly preferred to do her own investigating, but the young man had very decided ideas about gallantry and would not allow her to accompany him. While Nancy sat waiting in the car, she tried to figure out what the strange light might signify. It's barely possible Mr. Albin is in the house trying to recover the ship model which old Mr. Conjure promised him, she reflected. Yet that scarcely seems plausible either, for he's not the type to go prowling into houses at night. The 10 minutes elapsed, and Nancy opened the car door, determined to go in search of Jack. There was no need for her to do so, however. Just at that moment, the young man came down the private driveway, whistling a gay tune. False alarm, he called out cheerfully. Was there no light? Nancy asked in disappointment. No, the place is as quiet as a tomb. The only sound comes from the sea. I'm certain I saw a light, Nancy murmured. I'm positive it flashed 3 times. Imagination plays tricks upon us all now and then, her companion laughed. He turned the car around in the road and drove back towards the clubhouse. Nancy was very quiet. She could not believe that her imagination had tricked her, yet she did not wish to contradict her escort either. I believe someone must have been skulking around the grounds, she thought. Whoever the person was, he probably extinguished his lantern before Jack came within view of the house. At the country club, Nancy danced several numbers, then was relieved when Bess and George suggested that they all go back to the hotel. The girls were tired, and without meaning to do so, slept late the next morning. Just after 9 o'clock, Nancy's telephone rang. A telegram for you, said the voice of the hotel clerk. We'll send it right up. The girl whirled around to face Bess and George. Of course the wire is from Mrs. Owen. Oh, I'm almost afraid to read it. Nancy had the door open before the bellboy could rap. With the yellow envelope in her hand, she leaned weakly against the wall. Oh, open it and find out what it says, Bess urged. Here, let me do it, George offered, taking the message from her chum. She ripped open the envelope. Yes, it's from Mrs. Owen, all right. Nancy could not bear the suspense. Let me see it, she cried, and reclaimed the sheet of paper. Her face was a study as she read the message. What does she say? Bess asked eagerly. Was your theory right, Nancy? Yes, it was. I don't understand the mix-up of why anyone thought Mrs. Owen wasn't living. Of course she's living, George chuckled. We knew that before we left River Heights. You don't understand what I mean. The woman we met in the park is Alice Owen, the wife of my father's client. She's overwhelmed to learn that her husband still lives, so she must have thought he was dead. She's ready to start for Seacliff at once if Mr. Owen still wishes to see her after all these years. If he wishes to see her, Bess echoed, the poor man will be overjoyed. Yes, Nancy agreed, but I don't intend to make the same mistake twice. Mr. Owen must be prepared properly for the good news so that he'll not become excited again. I'll entrust the message to the nurse and let her give it to him when she thinks the time advisable to do so. Highly elated and feeling that in a way she had redeemed herself, Nancy took the telegram to the man's room where she quietly inquired about the condition of the patient. He's much better today, the nurse replied. However, he worries constantly. It really will help him to learn the truth about his wife, for he'll have no peace of mind until he does. Nancy was relieved to hear this opinion and felt happy that she could report the good news which was in store for the patient. She left the message with a young woman who promised to read it to Mr. Owen when he should become a trifle stronger. That afternoon, the man was told of the contents of the wire from his wife. It was impossible for him not to become somewhat excited, but he accepted the news as quietly as possible. Tears of joy trickled down his cheeks. Tell Alice I do want her, he murmured. Make her understand that I need her more than ever. That it was all a horrible mistake, our separation. If only I might talk with her just for a moment. When Nancy heard this, it occurred to her that Mr. Owen easily might convey his own message by means of a long-distance telephone call. Yet, having learned one lesson, she thought it best not to utter this thought. Instead, she quietly consulted the doctor. Why, yes, I believe Mr. Owen is strong enough now to withstand the excitement. The physician agreed after a moment's reflection. However, the conversation must be brief. Nancy was happy to put the call through, and after warning Mrs. Owen at the other end of the line that she must speak only a few words, she handed the instrument over to the trembling patient. Alice, he gasped, scarcely above a whisper. Is it really you? The listeners in the room could not hear the reply, but a happy light shone upon Mr. Owen's face as he recognized the familiar voice of his wife. He murmured a few loving words. Then the nurse stepped forward and gently took the phone from his hand. Just a minute longer, he pleaded, but she firmly shook her head. You'll see your wife soon, Nancy said to reconcile him. Tomorrow, he murmured happily as he dropped wearily back against the pillows. She's coming on the first train she can get. The nurse sent everyone from the room so that the patient might drop off to sleep. In the corridor, Carson Drew smiled at his daughter. "I'm sorry I reprimanded you yesterday, Nancy," he apologized. "After all, everything has turned out extremely well. Mr. and Mrs. Owen will be grateful to you until their dying days. And I'll always be grateful to Mr. Owen for postponing his dying day," Nancy laughed. "I feel as if a 10-ton weight had been lifted from my shoulders." "So do I," Mr. Drew admitted. He removed a $5 bill from the wallet he carried in his vest pocket. "Here, you deserve a celebration, Nancy. Take this and buy yourself a good time." "I'll buy myself a white bathing suit instead," Nancy said. "They're all the style here at Seacliff." "Thanks, Dad." Bess and George were eager to do some shopping too, for they wished to purchase gifts to take home to some young cousins. They were delighted to accompany Nancy to the business district of Seacliff and help her select the new swimsuit. It was after 6 o'clock when the girls returned to the hotel. Fearing that Mr. Drew would be annoyed because they would delay dinner, they hurried toward the elevator. Nancy did not stop to ask if there was any mail. She was surprised when the hotel clerk signaled to her. "This letter came late this afternoon. Special delivery. I thought it might be important." Nancy thanked him and took the communication, noticing that it was stamped Seacliff. At first she thought it might be from Jack, but she immediately abandoned that idea when she saw that the address had been written by a woman. Opening the letter, she glanced at the bottom of the page to learn the identity of the writer. Then, her eyes sparkling with excitement, she moved swiftly toward her chums. "Girls," she announced in delight, "at last! I've heard from Miss Morse." And chapter 16. Gomennasai. Chocolate and chapstick, even better. I have a hint water. I don't know what those are. They're yum? Okay, I'll have to try it. She danced mechanically. Is she a robot? Run away from Jack. Right? Suspicious looks. We'll have to see what Jack is up to. Let's keep an eye on this guy. Pretty sure the song is 30 minutes long. Well, it's an LP that's like an hour and 20 minutes. And apparently it has some details about it, and it looks like it's a story. Girls, at last! Thank you for clapping. That's a horrible dance is what that is. Anyways, so I will not be here next week. So there won't be any streams unless I get to do IRL streams. And if I do get to do those, they will be impromptu and there probably won't be an announcement. So, just, you know, we'll keep in touch. I'll be around. I'm not going out of the country, so I will still be on Discord and everything. And then I'll just make my schedule for the week after, close to when I'm getting back. So, I will be back next Monday. And I think that's really all I have to announce. But thank you guys for being here. You be safe too. Have a good weekend. I'm leaving Monday, so I'll kind of be around for the weekend. I work. Tomorrow's me and Keaton's anniversary, and then Sunday I work in the afternoon. So, good evening. Thank you for being here. See you later. Thank you. I don't know what we're gonna do yet, but we're gonna do something. So, okay. Love from me to you, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.